Welcome to Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness Podcast, a Mentalus Academy production. Let's learn more about ourselves, inside and out.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast, Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness Podcast. We're very happy to have you back with us today. Our guest is Justine, who will introduce herself in a moment. And we're very grateful to have you on our show today. Thank you for doing this. So, Justine, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the topic you've chosen for today?
Okay, thank you. My name is Justine. I'm from Lebanon. And as background, I'm peace builder and conflict transformation activist, as well as mediator. And I will go through why I have chosen this topic. Because in Lebanon, with the 18 religion communities and with the ongoing war, trauma is the topic. And I'm not saying only the collective trauma, but also the personal trauma that most of the Lebanese, in order not to say 90% or 99% from the Lebanese, are suffering from trauma. And this topic still a taboo. And with all the misconception of trauma or something that we don't want to talk about, I think it's crucial nowadays to emphasize this topic and at least a bit of awareness what is trauma and how we can heal from trauma and if we can heal from trauma. So at least to make it a bit simple and for everyone to hear a bit your perspective, because definitely I think sharing experiences is always an asset.
That's very true and a very important topic, to say the least, right now in the world and everywhere.
Yeah.
And you bring a very unique perspective to it from your.
Very true.
Yeah, from the Lebanese perspective, I bet, yeah, it's a very unique and interesting experience at the same time.
Nadzin, you were going to add something.
I said very true indeed. And I would say maybe, yes, coming from Lebanon, there is this background of war and trauma. But I think that it doesn't stop at this point. I think that trauma can come in different shapes and different types. So it doesn't just apply to Lebanese people. I think your subject, I find, applies to all kind of populations and people.
Yeah, indeed.
So go ahead.
Justine, what were some of your questions maybe for us today?
Yeah, honestly, I want to start from a general overview to a specific one, and taking into consideration from the people that don't know about trauma, and then to go through the process in itself. So my first question to you is, when you hear the word trauma, what comes to your mind? An event, a feeling, or an ongoing experience? So I would like to know your not definition, but when you hear the word trauma, what comes to your mind?
There are several definitions of trauma. You see, there are the situational trauma where one event happens and it creates
Mhm.
this feeling of, I'm going to go back, actually. I'm going to stop and go back. Trauma is not
Yeah.
the event itself, it's the feelings we have in regard of this event. So it can be one single event or it can be repetitive events. It's actually how we perceive what's happening or not perceive what's happening. By definition, trauma is when you have your life put at danger of risk of dying, or the perception, I highlight the perception of your life is put in danger. And that is very objective and subjective and different to each person. Some people find things not traumatic while others have their experience traumatic. And that being said, when we mean trauma, we mean we haven't been able to process the emotions that came with that event. This is what we actually call trauma. It's the back end of what is happening in terms of this event. Daniela, do you have something to add?
I would just add the layer just to piggyback on what you said, Nadine, that it is very subjective. It depends on the person. First, people will react to trauma differently or to events differently, whether they cause trauma or not for them or to what extent. But on top of that is also the past experiences that we carry into the traumatic, the resiliency that we may have already built up or not built up in our lives, the previous experiences with other traumatic events, which then cause us to react a certain traumatic event. So it's really multi-layered and quite complex.
So maybe here the question, how do you differentiate between personal trauma and collective or societal trauma?
I think you're asking because of your Lebanese background. You see, when a kind
Yeah.
of population is going through the same experience, we can say it's cultural or social trauma. But I can say, even within this, some people might experience personal traumas within this social trauma. It's how you perceive people going under the war. Yes, it is traumatic, but not everybody experienced this trauma the same way. Some people might feel less secure than others. Some people might feel more triggered or more affected by it than others. There are several situations.
Yes, and certainly there's a collective experience that comes through that creates like a collective or societal trauma. But at the same time, as I said before, the individual reaction comes into play too, which sometimes can actually make within that culture, within that society, create different pockets or different groups that react differently. For example, if our natural tendency, if we look at the concept of fight, flight, or freeze,
Oh, please. Yeah.
trauma will be different, and therefore might even within that society or that group create different pockets that react differently. Like one pocket may band together because their reaction is fight. Another group might band together because they're flee. It depends. So even within the collective trauma, there are differences. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got you. But here, for example, my question. So usually, can we consider, because you said also triggering events, because when these emotions are not expressed properly, definitely the suppression or from the past experience, that another trigger event will raise again those emotions. But here, can we consider, for example, a bad past experience with parents or family? And here, in order to give an example, the conditional love or the difference in gender or something within the family. Could we consider this a personal trauma, or it's something more psychological than a trauma?
I think we need to make difference here between trauma that is actual survival trauma or
Okay.
hard life events. So when you say gender or when you say how you've been brought up, or I don't know if you're referring for some kind of life threatening events, or people are affected by how they were brought up and it's commonly used as the word trauma. I think there's some difference to make there. But in that term, in that respect, I find that the way our upbringing might exaggerate or not the way we react when we are faced with actual trauma, meaning when we are actually faced to a life death perception or experience. You see?
Okay. All right. All right. This is important, yeah, because I think we have a misconception when it comes to trauma in that regard. Okay. If I may ask, in your context, and here when I say I know you are not only working in Canada, but which types of trauma feel most relevant or present in the context that you are working?
I say I'm gonna go back to Daniela, but trauma doesn't apply to a type or a personality or a country. It doesn't apply at all. People experience trauma. Somebody might fell from their bike, and for them, this is the end of their world, and they might get triggered after it. Trauma is not just because we live the war or just because we have crisis. It's people who have sexual assault go through trauma or not. It's how we relate to that event that is happening. And I think some people might live in denial, other might not, other might be triggered and might be affected more than that. But trauma can be shown in all different ways. Daniela?
Yes, I think we do see that, and it's very important for us, at least in the type of work that we do, not to be judgmental about it and not to put on something as, well, that's traumatic or that shouldn't be traumatic, or because as Nedzin said, for some people, a very, what looks to the outside like an innocuous event might be extremely traumatic. And for somebody else, surprisingly, like a cataclysmic event like a war or something else might not be as traumatizing as we would think. So it's quite subjective. There isn't really, at least as far as I'm concerned in the work that I do, I couldn't categorize and say, oh, these are the topics or the subjects that are traumatic for people, because it really is people dependent.
That actually goes back to how people process the emotions and the thoughts and their experience. Trauma is the brain and the body blocking us from experiencing truly what we are because we are afraid of dying. So what happens is we most of the time freeze, flee, or whatever, but the processing of the emotions and the thoughts that came with it is not happening. And this is why we keep repeating this, or this is why we get triggered after by anything that might remind us until we start processing those emotions in the situation.
And that's why repeated trauma is so difficult to get over, because you don't have time to process the first one, and then another one comes, and then another one comes. So it just gets encoded one on top of the other, and it becomes very difficult to that point where you process it. It's one event, and you have the fortune of being able to process it, work through it, and whatnot. That's one thing, but when it's continuous, it just layers, and it just becomes that much more difficult to deal with.
So here you triggered two questions in that regard. The first one, how can trauma shape the way we see ourselves and the world around us? And the second one, as practitioners, definitely you will work on the emotions that is hidden or suppressed. But what are also the practical steps when this emotions becomes on the surface?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, you looked like you were about to say something, Nedin, so I was leaving you the floor there.
It's about, you see, creating a safe space, and safe is very different to each person. What is safe relationship, safe environment, which can be very hard. I would say how people get triggered by anything because their perception of life becomes a dangerous one. It's not a safe place to go out. And this is how it gets them to be shaped. Their experience with the outside world, even the inner world, is often tamed by scary. So they are either reactional to that, meaning acting out or pushing or any kind of acting out, or going inward. So they might be paranoid, they got scared. So their experience might be very internal and they isolate themselves, or they can be, I'm going within extremes here. You see, it's a spectrum, but I'm going from one end to the other. And the other one can be just acting out whenever they cannot tolerate what they are experiencing inside themselves anymore. So they need to let it go in a way. There are also repeated destructive patterns in relationships because they cannot tolerate how it goes. I see, Daniela, you want to add something here?
I was going to say that, yes, I agree with you. It shows up in all kinds of places, like in relationships and whatnot. I was going to say that one of the most difficult parts, and maybe less so in the context of a war or things like that, but more in the context of trauma that's less apparent and maybe less collective, the first step is even to just to get someone to acknowledge that there was trauma to begin with. Because until you get to that, like they're never going to really be able to get in touch with the feeling behind it. And maybe that's also true because, Justine, you said at the beginning, it's something that's not even talked about. So even if collectively, like as a society, something isn't talked about, it's even harder then to bring up, like, yes, I feel this is a trauma response for me. You just go through life and say, this is how it is, this is reality, and don't really pay too much attention to it. So the toughest part is just to initially get in touch with the fact that you are feeling some form of trauma. And then from there to feel safe enough, as Nadzin said, to be able to bring it to the surface. Because if you've gone through trauma, it feels terrifying to go back there in yourself and bring it up again.
Yeah. So in a way, but in the process of healing, you let people go back to this event of trauma to live it, or not to live it, but at least to process it in a different way. It's part of the healing process, or it depends on each person, or
Go ahead. I will talk about what I have to say in regard of that after you, Daniela.
People put up defense mechanisms when they're hurt, when they've had something like trauma. They build defenses. Those defenses in the moment are not nefarious. They're not bad. They're actually good because they help protect the psyche. The problem becomes that then they get encoded and they just keep popping up everywhere in our lives. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to get people to get in touch with their trauma, as you said, or relive it when they don't have an alternate way of coping with it. So what we want to do is help them build better coping mechanisms and be able to work through the trauma within a safe space with a therapist who can help them do this, but not alone this time, and with somebody who can help them work through it. That takes a while. That's not something that you can do in a couple of sessions. That takes a lot of trust to be built up. That takes a lot of work to create that safe space. And then it doesn't come out as one piece, it just comes out a little layer at a time until the person feels safe enough to be able to work. Nadine, what were you going to say?
I find that a great introduction. There are modalities to work with trauma. It depends where you're coming from. But there are also modalities, like Daniela said, and the way I work as well, is not necessarily to revisit the event itself. You can revisit the emotions that are coming because they will show up in different ways also. And then you can start working with them to be able to feel any kind of emotion, because usually it's very hard to protect themselves. They stop going to any kind of sensation or any kind of thing that might take them out of the comfort zone. So sometimes you don't even need to discuss the event or what happened, how they experience it. You need to let them know what's happening around it and let them be able to process what's coming within themselves. With, as Daniela said, when we experience trauma in somatic trauma modalities, the body and the system thinks that we cannot process what's happening, it's gonna kill us. So one big thing to work with is, as she said also, to prepare the body and the mind to, oh, but I can deal with that and I can deal with other things, which makes the body stronger and the mind stronger in a way, so they can process all what's coming up with that.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was about to say that, yeah, it takes lots of time. So it's not reactivating the trauma.
Yeah, Nadine, because I know when you were in Lebanon, we addressed it in a way or in another when I asked you, can we really heal from trauma? And when I say, can we really heal from trauma? I know it's a long process. And I know when you are always triggered, and specifically in Lebanon, like we are always living on the edge because the uncertainty, the insecurities, and everything that will pop up in a way or in another. But why I'm asking, can we really heal from trauma? In a way, despite the Lebanese context, I'm moving myself out from the Lebanese context. But practically, why I'm saying this, because I have this discussion with you, with many of the practitioners. People tend to return back to the comfort zone or to the past they know the most. And that's why most of the people say, I'm done. I have worked on it. I'm aware of it. I'm trying my best. I know the emotions behind it and the events around me. But still, sometimes I block. I'm not being able to move a bit forward. So that's why the question is, do we really heal from trauma?
I think when we had this discussion, I also said what I'm going to say now. Healing doesn't mean we forget what happened. And healing
Yeah.
doesn't mean we don't react. Healing somehow means we are less triggered and we know how to cope, to better cope with it. To start with. I see, Daniela, you have
Yeah.
also something to say.
I was going to say along the same lines, it's like somebody who comes to me because they suffer from anxiety will tell me, will I ever not be anxious? And my answer to that is this, which is you're never likely to be a completely non-anxious person, but you can learn to manage your anxiety, understand where it comes from. That's probably the biggest key for me, and be able to recognize it within yourself so that you can, when it does surface, manage it and at least reduce the intensity. So healing is a loaded word. Healing, if you intend healing to mean that's it, the trauma is gone, like it's never going to show up again, that would be very difficult to achieve, if not impossible.
Yeah.
There's always going to be traces of it. It's part of your lived experience. How could it not be?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and on top of that, like I said before, if it keeps happening, if you keep getting re-traumatized, if the cause is still there, that's even more difficult to just past for sure.
Yeah. No, thank you. Because really, sometimes we need to hear those words, and also maybe, as you were saying, both of you, to manage our expectations. Because I think people come with the highest expectations that, yeah, it's something that we need to process it, but also it should be gone when we are in the process. But yeah, I think to emphasize on this, because it's also important to make it clear as well.
Justine, I think a big
So
part of
here,
the
maybe,
healing is not to be
yeah,
triggered by it and to be able to make safe choices for ourselves,
yeah,
safe decisions, to
yeah.
be able to talk about it or to be able to, oh, this is what's happening. I'm triggered now by this. How can I not put myself in danger?
Okay, yeah. I'm taking also some notes. Yeah.
I was just going to say, and maybe for some people, it's even just a question of being able to put a space between the traumatic trigger and your reaction, just being able to put a little bit of time there and take a pause and say, notice what's happening. That could be enough. There's a lot of self-compassion involved here too, because there's a lot of self-judgment that comes in with, this happened to me 20 years ago. Why am I still being reactive to it? And there doesn't need, sometimes it's just a question of being able to put that pause. If you can actually just take the time and recognize what's happening, that's already a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So here, maybe it just pop up into my mind. What does healing from trauma look like for you, from your experience? Does it mean, for example, letting go? Definitely, you said finding ways to carry it differently. But like practical example, that when you say, yeah, this patient or person came to me in that way. And now we can see that he or she is dealing with trauma in a different way. So that's maybe my main question. What does healing from trauma look like for you?
I would say, from my standpoint, you hit on it, Justine, with what you just said, and that's by seeing a difference
Yeah.
in the reaction to it. If someone reacts to trauma by freezing and shutting down, it would mean seeing them not shut down and be able to open up about it. If someone reacts to trauma with the fight instinct, so aggression or lashing out, it would be seeing them become more reflective about it. So it's seeing a difference in the way that they react to triggers that would normally bring up the traumatic response. Nadine?
I would add to that also, I would add to that how they process their life, everyday life, because they would start, and we're talking about people who've been in therapy for a while, not just the way they look at their life and they go about their life becomes different in a way. The way, because trauma affects their sleep, their relationship, how they eat, how they are triggered, how they cope with emotion, how they are with their environment, the type of work they do sometimes, the type of relationships they go into. So you can see the difference in even small things, but in all the aspects of their lives where they are taking healthier decisions for themselves.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing is to see some form of movement. A lot of times, trauma does is it makes people feel helpless and unable to move or do anything. And to see them come out of that is like giving them thought and seeing that now all of a sudden they can take that and turn it into some form of constructive aspect of their life, whether it's relationships, as Zen said, or work, or something that's finding meaning again and purpose and channeling some of that into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I can also say that healing from trauma, it's not a destination we reach. It's an ongoing process that evolves with us and over time, and also to be open to deal with it.
Hey everyone, we hope you are enjoying this podcast. Want to find out more about this topic and much more? Check out our courses at Mentalist Academy. Find out more at www.mentalistacademy.com. And now, back to our podcast.
Definitely professional intervention play a role in our healing journey, because I know the professional intervention is highly recommended, but the personal effort and social support, I'm emphasizing this because, as I said in the introduction, the personal effort first to go to a professional intervention, it will take time, and also the social support without being labeled, specifically in Lebanon. Yeah, I would like to know in that regard the personal effort and social support in that regard.
I would make a distinction here because it does take personal effort and support can be a great help, but it depends how it's given. Because if you are in your blind spot and you are repeating the same thing over and over again, thinking you are having support and you are being actually feeding into that same pattern, I don't think this is a good way to go about it. On the other hand, if you are working on yourself with somebody that can pinpoint to you what's going on without being judged by it, and then you can see that, oh, I have other options, then here the personal effort and the support in those direction, I find it can be very helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just also reflecting on many experiences or people we heard them sharing this.
Daniela, you wanted to say something?
Yeah.
There was just something about the idea of personal effort to me that there's something that rings of blame there. That if somebody doesn't in the personal effort, somehow they're to blame. And I would say that there has to be a readiness, and that's true of trauma or any other issue that somebody might seek out professional help from, or even seek out help from their social network with. There's an element of personal preparedness there that really has to happen when it happens. Like you can't force that.
Yeah, definitely. If we want to give practical strategies on personal and professional, so what are the practical strategies that you have found effective in healing or supporting others in their healing journey?
That's a very big question. I think if I have to
Mm,
give
mm,
one thing, I would go with what Daniela said is compassion, just to be able to
mm,
be good to ourselves with all what's happening. That's huge. I say it like that. It's very simple. It's
mm.
not. It
I know.
is it is crucial to be able to give love to ourselves, because if you go through trauma, this is not what your experience was. It was practically the opposite. So to be able to give that to yourself, I find that's huge, and it takes you far. Danielle?
Yeah, yeah, true.
I come from a context of war, but my parents did. So I got to see that kind of trauma through them. And from what I saw, it was that compassion that they needed for themselves and for what they went through and for anything that they might have lived through in that time. And what they didn't have at that time that I guess we're a bit luckier to have today is a general awareness and understanding of how the mind works, and being able
Mm,
to understand that at least enough to be able to say, okay, this has triggered a response in me, and I don't need to judge that response. It is what it is. It is my response to this traumatic
mm,
event, and I can be compassionate towards myself about it. I can understand it. I don't need to judge myself for it. It doesn't mean I'm not strong enough. It doesn't mean I'm not capable. It just means this happened and this is the effect it had on me.
yeah, yeah, and definitely here also hearing you, I think definitely trauma will affect relationships with ourselves and with the others. And really, because you can see it's also not affecting the relationship, but the trust, self-trust and the trust with the others. How really we can rebuild this trust and connection with ourselves and with others in that regard.
When I said the world can be, people that experience trauma see the world as a dangerous place, this is what I meant.
Mm,
When everything
so
is
stay.
dangerous around me, I cannot trust that I'm going to be okay. I cannot trust that they can take care of me.
Yeah.
And there is a part of control in that, because if I cannot trust that anybody can take care of me, I need to take care of myself. And in that respect, I shut down sometimes, because
Yeah.
not to get vulnerable, because I don't know how it will go, what to do. So in that respect, and even then, I don't know how much I can trust myself, because if I'm aware of I'm doing or
Mm,
not. But let's say I know what I'm doing. I think I know what I'm doing. But if the world is a dangerous place, then I cannot trust that they will take care of me,
mm,
or at
mm,
least that they will not
mm,
hurt me again. Yeah, it does
yeah.
affect trust, it does affect connectivity.
You were asking, Justine, how do you rebuild trust? That requires, it almost requires like a re-experiencing, right? Of with somebody who will help you and show you that it's okay, it's safe. You can say what you need to say.
Mm,
And that gets built over time. So again, we go back to the idea that the more trauma is layered upon trauma, think of it like an onion. The more you have more layers that you need
mm.
to peel off before you can
You
get
go deeper, yeah.
trust again. So it's a process. It takes time. It takes a corrective
Mm.
experience, if you will.
Here, I would like to hear about your experience. If you have worked, definitely, I think you have worked with trauma communities. I don't know the process about when it comes, and if you do a group trauma therapy, and if you do, if you can explain the process, because I think there's a huge difference between the one-to-one and the group trauma.
So I have a very unique sort of working with trauma in that sense. I work with horses and I work
Mm,
groups and I work with horses because what I found is that the horses act very much like a projective screen. So with a group
ah,
of people who have suffered trauma, and certainly I saw a lot of that during COVID because there was a lot of people that were frontline support staff, something
yeah,
I'm sure pales by comparison to what's going on in Lebanon, but still here it was a big deal and the first time that a lot of those people were dealing with that. So I was working with groups with horses, and the horses actually brought up the trauma quite easily in the people I was working with because they
mm,
could project it onto what they were seeing the horses do with each other. And so that's my experience because I work that way with that modality. It's not for everybody, but I found that it
mm,
really helped to resurface some of those feelings and get them talking about it quite faster when they were able to see the horses as
mm.
models for their own trauma.
Okay, okay, interesting.
I would add to that, yeah, it is very hard to have groups, trauma groups, because they trigger each other. So there has to
Mm,
be a projective modality that it's not them that they're experiencing, they are
mm,
projecting it on. So art therapy, any kind of movement, horses, animals, anything
mm,
that they can project it on instead of projecting on each other and getting triggered
mm.
by each other. I
Yeah,
think in that respect,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So here tools are essential and efficient, despite if it's arts or horses, but in order to start, let those feelings out.
See, we were
Those are our experiences, actually,
Yeah,
Daniela.
we were talking
yeah,
safety, that's exactly what we're talking about. The projective
mm,
mechanisms allow it to be done safely because you're not talking about you. It's the same way that some people who work with children will use toys, will use dolls to get the children to open up about what's going
mm,
on. It's the same principle here.
yeah,
Yeah, and that I find useful in working with groups. Otherwise, as Nedzin said, you do end up with the risk of, if not done properly, of just everybody re-traumatizing each other, which is not what you want.
yeah, yeah. Maybe one of the main questions that always triggered me in Lebanon, we start by definitely we have to start by admitting that we lived a trauma, and this the first step. But my question, if I'm talking that we as community have started to admit it and we have started the process. Here I'm talking on community level and really on a big scale. To what extent do you think, definitely here I'm looking forward, what does a healed or healing life look like for a community impacted by trauma?
You are looking for a big stretch here. Huh?
When I don't at least to end up by something.
I cannot, I think I'm too biased to answer this question to start with. But
Mm,
when I heard you, I took a note of something that I would like to share. And I don't know how it can, I don't know if you can put it into something or you see, when we are
mm,
on survival mode, because this is the case now,
yeah,
survival mode, you don't
yeah,
have space to heal. You just have space to do what is necessary to stay alive. So, in that respect,
true,
I find
true.
to start being able to say that, oh, I can heal people. Trauma, this is why actually trauma gets triggered when the war is over, because there is space to go there. So when you reach that space of safety, or as Daniela said, this space, a buffer between the situation and you're experiencing, this is when we can start work on things, or this is when things start to show up. So I think the first step is to know what is survival and how do you cope with survival. What are your coping strategies that they, as Daniela said again, very functional, because you need them to function. And then when there is safety, or there is at least that sense of safety, this is where you can start
Yeah.
go into a healing place, or to start acknowledging what's happening.
You can't heal if the trauma is continuing. It's even as a community or as a society, like it's impossible to do that while the trauma continues. And where you see it, like Nedzin said, is once the sirens have stopped going off, now your nervous system can start to calm down and start to cope with it. And that's actually when the trauma comes back up.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with veterans come back from war. Like while they're in the war, they have no time to, while they're in combat, they have no time to sit there and process their trauma. It's when they come back and now all of a sudden they're safe at home, everything's fine. They go to the shopping center and they see suicide bombers everywhere. And the trauma comes to the surface and now they need to process it. So it's a difficult thing to do right now as communities. I guess the best you can do is be able to stand together and help each other survive. That's the survival mode. Like at least there's a collective experience going on there where everybody can try and help each other survive.
No, I know when you don't, if you want, your subconscious doesn't want to hear this, but it's the ugly truth because, yeah, you triggered something is the survival mechanism. And honestly, it's not an easy thing, specifically that at least as an activist, sometimes in this vicious circle, in a way, I'm hopeful, but yet I know the ugly truth, and the reality is a different thing. Yeah, I know it's really an interesting topic and ongoing one that myself I'm so interested in. But if you have like a short, simple message, like we say, the KISS principle, for really individuals facing trauma on personal level, what are the tips or messages that we can send, at least to make our life easier or a bit better?
I would say that you hit upon it a little bit with what you just said, Justin, which is you said you're involved in activism, but that's it. The idea is to be able to channel it into something, channel those feelings into something, however small, whatever it means for you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you have to go out there and lead the charge. It could be something as
Yeah,
simple as do something that's meaningful to you. Plant two
yeah,
flowers in your garden, if that to you is a symbol of moving forward, of doing something, of whatever it is
yeah,
personally that makes you feel like you can still move, you can still do something. Because doing something
yeah,
is what gets you out of that trauma of feeling helpless, of feeling hopeless. There's nothing I can do, whatever small thing. Some of the people who have survived horrible situations as prisoners of war and whatever, the way they
yeah,
survived, they kept their psyche moving was by giving themselves one outlet, something that was of their own, that gave them some feeling of
yeah,
autonomy. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah,
would go in the same
definitely.
sense of giving a meaning to something that
Yeah,
kind of gives you a track to go on. And yeah, being an activist, and I know the work you're doing is amazing, but it gives you a purpose to keep going on. And by that, you are not just doing nothing, as Daniela said, feeling helplessness and going into denial. You are just keep pushing somehow.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Really, really thank you for the insights. And sometimes putting them into a structural way, it's refreshing. And I know it's only 1 hour, but I think what you are doing, those podcasts are we are in need, because sometimes one sentence can really trigger your mind and your heart, and you'll say, at least I will start to do something. And specifically when you hear it from an outer perspective, because when you are in this shit, let me say it like this, you cannot sometimes think properly. Yeah, I mean, it was really inspiring for many things you have mentioned and said.
For you to say that something we do and something we say is inspiring is incredibly meaningful, because clearly you do a lot of inspiring things too.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us, Justine. I will also add that subjects like that might trigger big emotions with people just by listening to it, and just to be able to acknowledge that and be kind with themselves if they hear it, seek support. I think it would be very important.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly. So really, thank you, Daniela and Nadine, for offering me this opportunity, because also I think it's something that we need to give more of it and to let people more aware of it. Because honestly, I think the first step when we hear the word trauma, to keep it as it's only a word. It's not that something that big. The effect of it, definitely, and the consequences, we are not minimizing this, but at least to start to deal with it in a way like we deal with other normal stuff, in order to process it more. So really thank you for this opportunity, and very inspiring one.
Thank you for bringing a very honest voice to a very needed topic.
Thank you. Have an amazing day.
See you next time. Find out more at www.mentalizedacademy.com.